Have you ever wondered why the wealth gap in almost all the economies are not just large but growing? Over the last 50 odd years, the middle income has doubled their net wealth, but the lower income has actually gone from no wealth to being in major debt, while at the same time the top 1% has grown their net wealth by 10 times. Hi, my name is Dr. Barnard. I am CEO of Goldratt Research Labs and have always been very curious about what the real cause is of wicked problems that have been around for a long time. And then to see if I can develop very simple, elegant, not just explanations of these problems, but also possible solutions. Let's start with why is there such a large and growing wealth gap? The first is quite obvious in hindsight. I want you to think about a recipe, simple recipe to bake a cake. 4 steps, 4 ingredients, 1 temperature setting. How many ways are there to get it wrong? Yes, of course, many, many ways. Now, how many ways are there to get it right? Only one way. And that's also true for businesses as well as for us as individuals. There are so many ways that we can get it wrong and so few ways of getting it right. And that's why we end up seeing that only 1% of businesses and individuals end up owning almost all the wealth. The second answer is a little bit more mathematical. I discovered it by complete accident. Many years ago, my dad asked me to come and have a look at their business, specifically at their finances. He said to me, Alan, you're pretty good at maths. I think somewhere along the line they're making an error here in their calculations. So I said, why? He said, well, for the last 5 years or so, every quarter, we go out on tender. A good quarter, we can make 20% more than the previous quarter. In a bad quarter, we would lose about 20%. And his feeling was that these should balance out, right? As long as you've got equal amount of winnings and losings, they should balance out. Well, I started looking at the numbers and couldn't spot a mistake. He was absolutely right that their sales over time was actually going down. It wasn't stable as you would expect. And then I remember taking out my calculator, and I'd like you to do the same thing. Take out your smartphone, open up your calculator, put in 100, and then say plus 20% minus 20%. What do you get? Well, plus 20% is 120. Minus 20% brings you back to 96. You've just lost 4 of your wealth with a fair trade. If I keep on doing that, as you could see, if you keep on plus 20%, minus 20%, you'll keep on losing wealth essentially. And this is the simulation app that I want to show you today. So on the screen, 100 people. Each of them are worth $100 at the beginning, and they're trading with each other over 100 days. And every time they trade, they have an equal probability of winning or losing. What will happen over 100 days? Well, if they can win 20% if they win and lose 20% if they lose, then the question is what will happen? Do you think it will just balance out? I want you to look at the screen. The height of the bars is representing essentially the wealth of these people that are trading with each other. Pay attention to what happens over time. Can you see how some of these bars are growing enormously tall? And over time, the wealth gap is just growing larger and larger. So if we look at the results here, the wealth gap at the end, after just 100 days, was 11,000 times. The poorest trader has gone from $100 net wealth to just 10 cents. They've lost basically everything. And the richest one has gone from $100 to $1,100. And this is really, really interesting because in the simulation model, there's no discrimination. Everybody starts with the same amount of wealth. Everybody has an equal probability of winning or losing. So what's the difference? It's basically just luck. If you look at the trading result, what you'll find is that they were just lucky that even though the probabilities were 50-50, in this 100 days, they just won 60% of the trades and lost 40%. And when you go down to the poorest of the poor, it was just the opposite. And that basically destroyed their wealth completely. So what is the lesson from this simple example? Your number one priority as a business owner, but also as head of your family or one of the main providers in your family, has to be to protect yourself against downside risk. I developed a very simple formula that you could use to actually calculate how much you need to gain in order to compensate for specific loss. The formula is very simple. It's loss over 100 minus loss. So if you could lose 5% on a transaction, whether you're selling your time or you're selling a house or product or service, Doesn't matter. If you could lose 5% in the next period, how much would you need to sell more just to make up for it? It will be 5 over 100 minus 5. So 5 over 95 is about 5.2%. That sounds pretty fair. And at 50%, it's essentially 100%. Would be 50 over 100 minus 50. 50 over 50 means I need to be able to make 100% on the next transaction just to compensate for losing 50% on this. So that should be your number one priority. Make sure you are protected against big downside risk. That the probability that you could suddenly lose 6 months of your sales, 50% of your sales, like what has happened with many businesses during COVID, is almost zero, because you'd have to be able to make up at least 100% just to break even. The second one is that you have enough options that you can pivot to that has a big upside if it works and a small downside if it doesn't. And the better decisions you make, the more the odds are in your favor. And that is what can cause you to become one of the top 1%, or unfortunately can get you into the bottom 1%.